I'm Torrin Hallett. I am an REU student from Oberlin College and Conservatory. And this summer I took data which had been collected here at Hubbard Brook having to do with the water cycle. It was collected in last year, 2015, and I sonified the variables that we had and turned them into a musical piece. The goals of this project are to provide an oral representation of data as opposed to how data are traditionally represented in charts and graphs. We wanted another way for people to consume and interact with this data. We wanted to use sound to better understand pattern and process within the data, things that may not jump out as easily when looking at a graph or a chart, may jump out at someone else when they're listening to a piece that is made up of data. And finally, we want to provide opportunities for the non-scientific community to access data. So we're looking at reaching people who aren't scientists, who aren't as comfortable dealing with data represented visually, particularly visually impaired students. It's very difficult for them to access data in the methods that it's presented in nowadays. So we're looking for another way to get data and science out to those people. To sonify my data, I used a program called MaxMSP, which is a visual programming language and allows me to input the data for all the different variables. I can scale them to appropriate ranges that are going to be useful to me, and then I can use those ranges to manipulate an instrument which is playing, the pitch it's playing at, the volume at which it's playing, or the number of times its sound is being articulated. This is an example of my main interface in all of its glory. As you can see, a lot of stuff going on. When someone interacts with this, however, it's going to look like this. And from this interface, a listener can play the piece. They can jump to any month during the year. They can see where they are in the year, the date, and they can also over here turn on and off each of the variables independently. So you can listen to any combination of variables together and see which variables you're hearing and when they're being played from. There are three basic ways that this program creates sound. The first is through sinusoidal oscillators, so just basically producing a sine wave, and using the data I'm able to manipulate the pitch of that sine wave, or the frequency that it's playing at. I can also take pre-recorded sound files and play them back to this program and use the data to manipulate their volume. And finally, I can use a type of sound called musical instrument digital interface, also known as MIDI, which allows me to select and control an instrument that's going to play for a certain variable, the pitch that instrument is playing at, and how loud it's playing. This is an example of one of my sub-patches which uses some of these sonification methods. Right here I'm sonifying stream flow and solar radiation. Solar radiation is getting sonified over here. The data is getting input. And then it's getting calibrated to a range which is useful to me, and then I'm using it to control the volume of a pre-recorded melody which I wrote. I wrote a melody for the flute and a melody for clarinet in a notation program called Finale. I exported those melodies, the sound files, and then I'm playing them back on loop, and the solar radiation values are controlling the volume at which the flute is playing. Same thing is happening with the stream flow values. They're coming in, they're getting scaled to a usable range, and then they're manipulating how loud the clarinet is playing. And over here I have a MIDI patch which is playing cymbals and like a little hi-hat, and that will turn on when stream flow gets above a certain level, and then the stream flow values are again being calibrated to a different range, which is controlling how often those cymbals are being rearticulated. So I'm now going to play several examples of all the different sounds that I'm sonifying, and what you're going to hear is the whole range of data is going to be played. So we're going to start playing it at the bottom of that range for the particular variable. It's going to go up, and you're going to hear the highest range, and then it's going to come back down. And we're going to put these recordings online, and we package this all up and put it online so that people can listen to this as sort of an oral key, like you have a legend to a graph. And they can listen to these example recordings and use those to calibrate their ears to what they're going to be hearing throughout the piece. So the first variable we have is stream flow. which is controlling the volume of the clarinet melody, and also these cymbals, how fast they're playing. It sounds like this. So as the string flow gets higher, the cymbals are going to play louder, they're going to play faster, and the clarinet is also going to sound louder. Precipitation is represented by either a vibraphone sound or a celeste. When there's rain, when the temperature is above 0 degrees Celsius and we have a precipitation event, MIDI vibraphone is going to sound, and higher, heavier rain events are going to mean higher pitches and also louder vibraphone pitches. Sounds like this. Temperature is below 0 degrees Celsius and we have a snow event, it's going to be the same thing, but instead of vibraphone, it's being played on a celeste. String flow and precipitation are, of course, related. So when you're listening to the piece, when you hear precipitation, you hear that vibraphone or that celeste sound, you can listen, and chances are the string flow is going to go up, and you'll hear the clarinet start to play louder, and you'll hear the cymbals start to kick in and start to play faster. Evapotranspiration, which is the water leaving the watershed through it transpiring as the trees are transpiring and as it's evaporating off the ground, is represented by a MIDI synthesizer, which I think sounds like something breathing, as the trees in the ground are breathing this water vapor back into the atmosphere. Sounds like this. And solar radiation is represented by the flute melody that I mentioned earlier. Its volume will go up and down as the sun comes in and goes away, or as clouds come in and cover the sun. And on the micro level, solar radiation is going up and down, very small, with every day. So when you listen to the piece, you can hear the flute come in and out constantly. But over the course of the whole year, it's traveling in more of a large bell curve. And so the volume of the flute peaks in the middle of the year in the summer, and then it'll come back down and get quieter towards the end of the year. Evapotranspiration and solar radiation are also related. So if you hear the flute playing louder, more chance that you'll hear higher pitches of the breathing synth pad. Wind speed is represented by a constant droning pitch. As the wind speed increases, that drone will get higher, more octaves will be added. And then I also hooked up wind direction to control the panning of the drone. So you'll hear this drone out of the left or right speaker, depending on which way the wind is blowing. Air temperature is controlled by a simple, it's sonified by a simple sine wave, which goes up and down with the air temperature. Those three variables are also related. So if you hear more flute, you may hear higher drone, which represent higher wind speed, and you may also be hearing the air temperature be getting higher, you hear a higher sine wave as the sun is shining and heating up the temperature. Soil water storage is represented by a pan flute, which is playing a major 7th chord. As there's more water in the soil, more notes of this chord will be added, and the pitch will get higher and it will get louder. Air pressure is represented by a kettle drum or a timpani drum, which is constantly rolling, and as air temperature goes up, the pitch of this drum will go up and it will get louder, and as air pressure goes down, the pitch will get lower. represented by a piano, which is constantly playing a chromatic scale. Higher humidity means higher notes, lower humidity means lower piano notes. And this has the advantage of accentuating the extreme values of the relative humidity, because the higher notes of the piano are going to come through the sound mass a lot easier, and so you'll be able to pick those out and hear them when there's an extreme high humidity. And the lower notes of the piano are going to sustain more, so you'll be able to hear those as well, and that'll help you pick out the extremes. If you put them all together, we have, I have now a sonification of a summer rain event from the end of July, and we're going to play it. The data is going by every hour. We're getting every 100 milliseconds, we're playing 1 hour of data. And as we play it, this line will move across the graph, and you will hear a couple of things in succession. First, you'll hear the precipitation come in. You'll hear the vibraphone play. Then you'll hear the stream flow go up. You'll hear the cymbals come in. Then you'll hear the soil water storage increase, and you'll hear more notes of that pan flute chord. And then finally, you'll hear evapotranspiration go up, and you'll hear higher notes out of that breathing synthesizer. As far as looking forward, and the future potentials of data sonification as projects like this one are repeated in the future, we hope that we can increase public interaction with scientific data, and that this will entice members of the public to interact with the data more, because it's something that they may find more interesting. It's a musical piece, it's a work of art. It's not a huge table with lots of different numbers on it, which can be cumbersome to sort through. We hope that this will make people also interact longer with the data, enough that they can start to draw their own conclusions from it. This is, of course, a challenge to the current methods of data representation, but I think that we can represent large data sets more effectively this way. The recording you just listened to sonified 10 different variables all at the same time, and as you listen to it more and more, you'll be able to pick out different variables coming through and be able to tell what's going on more effectively. As opposed to having to sort through a large graph or a big chart or a huge table with all sorts of numbers on it, this can maybe be a better way to communicate large sets of data. Graphs paired along with sonifications, like what we just saw, can also act as a bridge to help the scientific community adapt to this new way of looking at data representation as well. This engages multiple parts of the brain with data analysis, and plays on our oral memories as well, because it activates the oral center of our brain as opposed to just visual centers when we're dealing with looking at charts and graphs. And this oral memory is really interesting because it can be used to store things that are difficult to memorize otherwise. We all know the lyrics to many, many, many songs, but it may be hard to memorize, a list of vocab words or something for a language class. And here, too, we can sort of memorize a whole year worth of data as a song, and that may stick easier in someone's memory than trying to look at a graph and memorize the shape of the graph or all the numbers in the chart. And finally, we can use this in the scientific community to alert scientists to patterns and processes that may not be able to be seen in charts and graphs, but may come through clearer in the sonification. And this also can alert them to instrument failures. If you hear something in a piece that sounds a little off and catches the attention of your ear, it could be because of an event, an anomaly, or that